Infinity Nikki has to be the most interesting game of 2024. Why would I call an infinite dress style, fashion oriented game one of the most interesting games? Because it's doing something that is oftentimes never seen from Western games development. They're making games that are girly and more attractive to the female fan base. And I think when we hear about making games more attractive to a female fan base, we usually see a mature self-insert of some LGBTQ woman that's stronger than every man and is non-girly and appropriates every masculine trait possible. But this is not the case with Infinity Nikki. We get something that is really harkening back to a time where girls were girls, and we get that associated with a lot of the fashion style and focus and dress styles of the character. And I think that is the most interesting thing about this game. And when I look into it more, see some of the gameplay, I see that it's still a battle type of game where you are attacking things, you are discovering things in a Zelda type of way. And I think that is the most interesting thing I'm seeing about this game, where it has its own rhythm, its own identity, and it's doing its own thing in a time where everyone is creating the same type of game when they're trying to make a game for a female game player base, where it is just appropriation of every masculine trait and putting it into a female body and saying this is what women want. And that is not the case with Infinity Nikki. It's making something wholly unique on its own that will appeal to a female fan base, and I think it's doing what we saw happen in the movie theaters with Barbie. They made Barbie look like Barbie and dress like Barbie and act like Barbie, so a lot of female fans went and saw the Barbie movie. And I think this is the case with Infinity Nikki, who is doing things that are impossible to do nowadays in the Western games development sphere, and that's why it's not being made by a Western game dev. It's being made by a Chinese developer. And I think that is the interesting thing about this game, where we're getting these high quality, interesting, unique ideas from outside countries that are not influenced by these political, progressive, activist ideals that have invaded the space of gaming. And I think that is the thing that makes this game stand out the most. And if you look at some of the story details of the game and what's going on with the game itself, you realize they have some dark and in-depth kind of fantasy elements that you would see from a Studio Ghibli type of production. And I think that's the thing that's been lost now in gaming, where it's always too dark and modern everything that is being made today in gaming. And I think this has a childlike innocence and feel to it, but has those elements that it will merge in with some battle type of games. Some of the earlier mobile games of Infinity Nikki, where there were certain elements that were introduced, like a civil war, like main characters dying or disappearing and discovering themselves. And I think that's something that we don't really see nowadays in modern Western gaming anymore. These are ideals that are detached from the creatives nowadays, that are kind of incapable of making a story like this because they're so self-obsessed and narcissistic and focused on their own personal struggles and representation in everything that they touch. And I think that's the thing that we're not getting in Infinity Nikki. We're getting a fantasy dress-up style video game that is focused on the ideal parts of ourselves and elements that we would like to explore that are impossible to explore in real life. And I think this is a game that will attract a broad base of fans, not only female fans, not only male fans, not only LGBTQ fans, because for some reason people in the Western games development sphere don't understand a lot of people in the LGBT community, specifically trans presenting individuals, like dress up games, like games where you actually can be feminine in games. They don't want to be the uglified Pokemon avatar that people expect them to be. And I think that is a situation that we're going to see Infinity Nikki benefit from, because it understands that people like beautiful things, and a lot of the female fan base like dressing up beautiful things. And I think that's the situation we're going to see with Infinity Nikki. I think it will be the quiet success that will pop up and gather a large audience, because it's doing something that Western games developers refuse to do, because they're hung up in their own activism and political progressive thought forms, that they refuse to believe this is something that people will actually pay attention to. And I think that is just a false narrative that they built in their own mind. And I think Infinity Nikki is going to be one of those definitive games that shows, oh, a lot of people like this, and the female fan base that we're always trying to chase actually prefers to play this rather than the butch lesbian that we made for Call of Duty. And I think that is the situation that we're going to see develop within the gaming industry. Of course, it won't be recognized, but I think this game will get the fan base that it deserves, and I think it will have a bit of success. It's not going to be the biggest game of the year, but I think it will make enough money where we're going to see sequels and some quiet fan base and of course cosplay of this character. And I think it is an exciting thing to see where actual game developers are making unique things that are unrestricted by the standards of Western politics. And I like that for this game. I think this makes this game the most interesting game because it's doing something that a lot of people will refuse to do within the gaming industry. And I think just reading about the game itself, that it has a lot of story elements to it. Like I mentioned, it has that Studio Ghibli vibe where you're exploring kind of a world and then maturing and balancing some fantasy elements within that. And I think that's why some of the Western cartoons have been failing, because they're not able to balance those thoughts out. Besides a few Pixar movies here or there, even Pixar is failing now. And I think having these games come out that have that element, that mature and adolescent element, that wonder that is still there, I think that's the thing people are missing in video games now. We used to get it with a bunch of platform games that used to come out in the past, but those platformers are few and far between. No one wants to make those games anymore. Everyone wants to make some super realistic modern game or inject some super adult elements into a fantasy game. And I think we just want the in-between, something closer to that charm we saw with those platformer games. And I think that's what we're going to get with Infinity Nikki. And it's doing something that we haven't seen in the West for a long time. And I think it's combining elements of games like platformers, like Rayman, like Spyro the Last Dragon, like Gex, a bunch of other games that we play and love, Jak and Daxter, including all these elements and adding its own element of some of these gacha games from China where you're going to have these beauty standards that are elevated. I think that's the thing I like about it. Of course, it's going to have a bit of a Zelda element as well. I think this is going to attract the attention of gamers. This is a game I'm looking forward to. I will probably play it because I just like how the combat is looking for it. It looks like something that will be more engaging. It won't just be about your clothes, but of course I think people are gonna love these clothing elements as well. And I think that is how you make a game that attracts multiple genders, multiple community members, not just male, female. I'm talking about LGBTQ as well. You make something that is beautiful, that is engaging, that attracts many groups. And I think what they do nowadays is the opposite. They try to remove these beautifying elements and make everything displeasing to everyone. I think this is the opposite of what we're seeing with Infinity Nikki. And I just like that some gaming studios outside of America are doing something like this. And it is a beautiful thing to see. Hopefully it continues. Hopefully it is a success. I like to see game companies do their own unique thing without holding back. And it seems like only the Chinese developers and of course Korean developers are willing to do that. But you leave your comments, tell me what you think about this game. I think it looks interesting. I think it is the most interesting game of 2024. But if you disagree, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Maybe you have another game that you think will be more interesting. Of course, Black Myth Wukong is another game that may surpass it, but this is one of the top games I'm looking forward to as well. But you leave your comments, tell me what you think, like, share, and subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.